Anyway, so I'm going to probably end up skipping some of this information in the interest of trying to get through more, more quantity or breadth rather than total depth, but, and this is already only a culling, I get lost. Okay, so to pick up where we left off last week, we've established already a couple of things. We've established that whether or not Leah was literally hated or not, I'm going to sit down. Whether or not Leah was literally hated or not, she certainly...
Yamim Head, please come to the Student Activities Office for our meeting. Yamim Head, Shabbat, Bravo Gottlieb, and Corinne Zahan, meeting in the Student Activities Office.
Whether Leah was actually hated by...
Dr. Knapp's AP Psych class, please go to room 204.
Okay. Whether Leah was actually hated by Yaakov, which is what the shot of the text indicates and what Rashi and Ramban both seem to feel, or whether it was more a sense of feeling hated or feeling insulted because she was loved less proportionally to Rachel. Either way, she feels like she's inferior. And then we looked at the names of her first 4 sons and how each one of those names to a certain degree reflects her emotions until she gets to Yehuda, and at that point she demonstrates some contentment, whatever, if not happiness, then she's at least content, right? She says, now I will thank God, and whether it's the Rashic view of this idea of knowing that there would be 12 sons, and then, so she now knows that she has the greater than average portion, which is a homiletic, or if whatever reason she feels now that she has proved herself that it's not chance, and that this was not a wrong marriage, because one of the Mefarshim says that Leah felt herself guilty for having stolen Yaakov, because she knew she was the older sister and destined to marry the older brother. So she herself felt uncomfortable in this union, like she's tempting the fates, and that with each child she recognizes, like, okay, no, this isn't a fluke, this is, and somehow with the number 4 she recognizes that this is God's will, and she's happy.
May I just add one thing, because you're focusing on the psychological of the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was not chosen, there was no act of free choice on Yaakov's part. No matter what else happens,
Right,
you can never undo that.
correct.
And if she already has her reasons for being insecure, and we hear a little bit,
Right.
the text tells us, then she can't fall back
Correct,
on that.
correct,
And she can miss that her whole life.
correct. And then we see from Rachel, right, that she is jealous. She also feels insecure, and she feels either because she feels spiritually insecure in the sense that, okay, must mean that Leah is holier, more righteous than me because she has had children and I haven't, or she's just jealous because Leah has what she wants. Then we get into the next segment, which is that she basically comes at Yaakov and says, give me children. They have an argument. She, to her tremendous credit, kind of really hears and integrates that, let's look at the objective evidence. This isn't about me, Yaakov. This is about you, Rachel. And when you have a problem, then you have to be the one to deal with it in the sense of turning to God or taking action, which is a really important life lesson. Not that she doesn't have a right to her sorrow, but to wallow is not acceptable. Or to take it out on somebody else is also not acceptable, another human. And Rachel listens, and she gives Yaakov her maidservant, and 2, she davens, and then she has 2 children, Dan and Naphtali. The first one is named in recognition of the fact that she recognizes that she was wrong, and that she effectively does teshuvah and says, God saw me and God judged me and God heard my prayer and gave me a child. And then the second one is about the fact that, again, it's like I wrestled with God, or I pressed God, or God is acknowledged in there, but so is her sister. In other words, with Naphtali, we've kind of moved beyond Rachel qua Rachel, and Rachel is back in quote-unquote relation to her sister. And that's where we ended up, okay? We're now on Pasuk Yudalid, 14, and we meet Reuven. Poor Reuven. We're still in Perek Lamed. He tries so hard. He always just tries so hard.
Firstborn.
Yeah, classic firstborn. Okay, so this is the incident of the mandrakes or whatever. Hi.
Hi,
Ariel, do you still have last week's sheet, or you don't
I
have?
think so.
Okay, because if you do, great. If not, I made more copies, and here is some of those. Okay, there, we have last week's and this week's. We're up to Pasuk Yudalid, right. So which on last week's sheet is, it's the second actual page, and on this one is the first. Like, I just copied the necessary pages for this one. Thank you. Okay, this is annoying me.
I had that.
So we're gonna take our plastic, or this one anyway. No, but this won't creak as much. This one, well, we'll see. No, this seems pretty more sturdy. We'll see. Okay, I've moved chairs. Nope, this is a quiet one. Okay, good. Okay, so this is a poor Reuven. So Reuven comes along. It's Pasuk Yudalid, Vayelech Reuven, and just FYI, anytime verbs in the Torah always have both a physical meaning and a psychological, emotional, spiritual meaning. Vayelech is another way of saying he took action.
Oh.
Okay? Lakum, the verb lakum means to take initiative. That's more of an emotional state, like Vayakam and Vayelech in Sefer Yonah, which is repeated numbers of times. But, lalechet is both the physical act of walking, but it's also movement, activity. Right? So Reuven took action, and all of the Parshanut here say because he saw that his mother had stopped having children. Right? She had 4 children. And now, in the meantime, Rachel has 2, and all of a sudden Leah has stopped having children. So it was in the harvest time, and he found Dudaim in the field. Now, just as an FYI, he found means he looked for them. These Dudaim, and I highly encourage you, if you ever have a chance, to go to, it's called Ne'ot Kidumim. It's a pain in the tushy to get to, but worth the trip. It is a preserve, I guess, a nature preserve of the flora and fauna, or just fauna, whatever, the vegetation from everything that's mentioned in Tanakh, with like lots of signs, and it's beautiful and it's cool, and it's just, to me anyway, as a Tanakh geek, really amazing to see these things. We were there in the winter of 2014, which is when it's not brutally hot, and it was the first time that I really did see a shkedia blooming, and all sorts of cool things. So these mandri, these dudaim, they're tiny little white flowers. They were actually in bloom. I, like an idiot, forgot to bring my photo of them. Tiny little white flowers. They're like this, and they kind of come up from between the rocks. Imagine like how violets grow, or how edelweiss grows in the mountain, like any of these like small mountain flowers, but they're not mountain flowers, they're valley flowers, and they're of the jasmine family, and the reason they're called in Latin and then in English mandrakes is that if you look at a picture of them, it really does look like a male anatomy of the penis and then the testicles, like the way the root of the flower grows if you pull it out of the ground. That's what it looks like. And from time immemorial, thank you Wikipedia, both, in the Middle East and in the Far East, this plant was either associated with being an aphrodisiac or with a fertility inducer. Whether it was an aphrodisiac first and then because it was an aphrodisiac, people started having babies, or it worked the other way around, I don't know, but it, and this seems to have been in China, in India, in Persia, in Mesopotamia, in Egypt. Like this flower was where it was at. It was a very widely accepted truth. And I'm not going to go into the theological aspect, which some of the commentaries do go into, about whether it's okay to believe in that stuff, because if you believe that God is the master of life and death, etc., that's a whole different sheer. For right now, we've got Reuven, who at this point is, if you think about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so he's maybe 7 years old at this point, right? Him, his 3 younger brothers, and then another 2. Like, even if you're just doing one, bam, 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 he's little. This is a little boy trying to do something nice for his mommy. And the question amongst the Mefarshim is whether, is he bringing her these flowers because they are rare and pretty, like a 4-leaf clover, right? They had the reputation, aside from the deeper herbologica, did I just say that? The herbology of it, remember when we were little, right? We knew that 4-leaf clovers were rare, so we specifically went and looked for them and then brought them as a present to our mummies because they were rare and because we took the effort to find them. So that's one opinion. Other opinions say no, he heard people talking, he was old enough at this point to somewhat hang out with the guys, and he knew what the power of this herb was, and he went and he brought it to his mother. Now, so he went and he brings it vayave el Leah imo, and the text points out specifically Leah, his mother. We know it's his mother. Let's heard that a few psukim ago, but the text is highlighting the relationship. He's bringing it to his mother, and if he's doing it because he knows what they've done for, this is the first indication of Reuven's tragic flaw, which is he is trying to help good intentions, bad outcomes. And in particular, this incident and then the later incident with the bed and Bilhah and whatever happened between him and Bilhah, whether literally he slept with her or whether, according to the Midrash, he moved the bed, whatever it is, he's violating their marital life. And he's overstepping a major boundary, which is a problem. Number one, that he's overstepping the boundary, but number two, that somehow the boundary was porous enough that he felt especially as an adult, that he could overstep it, or that he felt so impassioned, that seems to be the common denominator. He is so dedicated and loyal in that classic firstborn son to his mother's honor, that it's tragic. I mean, it's really, I would say it's tragic in the true Greek Shakespeare sense of the word tragedy. And no sooner, literally in the same pasuk, which is interesting in and of itself, right? You would think it would say, blah, 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 b'yimei kitzir, chitim, vayimtza basodeh vayaveh otam el Leah imo. Stop. But we don't stop. We have an etnachta. Great, we have a semicolon. And then immediately, bam, vatomer Rachel el Leah, she clearly sees this, right? Tni na li, please give to me duda e b'nei, from some of your child's duda e. So she does this. Hang on, let me see which Parshan. Right, so it's just FYI, so it's the Radak that says that he was like 7 years old. He's the one who said that he's just going out to find like nice, pretty smelling flowers. He was 7, he brought these, they smelled nice, they're from the jasmine family, and he brought him, he brought him to his mother. without really knowing what was going on. And then Rachel saw them, if you look in the Radak, and she immediately jumps on it because he doesn't, according to the Radak, Reuven doesn't know what they are, but she knows what they are, and says, let me have some. And then, okay, so the Abarbanel is really, 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 really long, so shockingly I'm not going to go through it right now. So I'm going to go down to Rav Hirsch and say that, okay, so he's commenting on the two psukim, so she sees them. I'm going to go to Tefvav first before we get into the Hirsch. So Rachel, so then Leah says back to Rachel, she says something very angry and nasty, but also puzzling if you really understand what she's saying. Is it such a little thing, or like, is it not enough, that you took my husband, and now you are also going to take my son's Judaim? And Rachel said back, Lachein, therefore, Yishkav imach halayla tachat Judaei b'nei. Therefore, he will sleep with you in place of, or in return for, the Judaim of your husband, of your son. So, what the Mefarshim, the way the Mefarshim understand this, what was it that she meant by, you took my husband from me? That now that Leah had stopped having children, Yaakov felt no need to spend time with her physically, and he moved, already at this point, he moved permanently into Leah's tent. I'm sorry, Rachel's tent, right? Which, number one, is a tremendous slap in the face. It's a public embarrassment. Number two, it might even be halachically problematic, right? Assuming that, these kind of codes of conduct that we have, that a man owes his wife a certain amount of physical intimacy, comes from a much more ancient tradition, or if you want to assume like the Midrash.
But much later than that.
Pardon? Or it could come from later than them and he wasn't aware of it yet, or, it depends on your perspective on how, this is speaking again, how much Torah, quote unquote, the Avot kept. Like, in other words, according to the Midrash, for whatever it means, the Avot kept the whole Torah. So if you want to work with that a priori, then Yaakov knew the halacha and he was violating it. If you want to go the simpler route, which is there was no Torah yet at this time, then Yaakov's actions, while kind of, I don't know.
It's still an emotional.
It's an emotional kind of
whether
cruelty,
it's
but,
halachic
right,
or
it's an
not.
emotional cruelty, but it's also understandable, right? He loved Rachel. He felt this is who he worked for, this is who he wanted to marry. He was duped out of her. He's, not getting anything out of being with Leah, namely children. He doesn't love her as much. Why wouldn't he move into Rachel's tent? Not to mention the fact that he is trying to make Rachel feel better because she doesn't have any children of her own. We don't stop to think about the complexity of this family situation. And there are kids around already. There are at least 6 of them. And Reuven, at least, seems to be somewhat aware of what's going on. That when we see the behavior later of, let's say, Shimon and Levi, number one, the rage that they demonstrate, but number two, the rage in defense of their sister, in other words, the female, it starts making sense because these boys grew up knowing that their mother was second best. And we talk about a Cinderella story. This isn't a stepmother. These are co-wives or co-mothers. It's like my heart breaks when it really is, and again, that's why it's so amazing to me that long term this family worked it out. And that as tenuous as that working it out was, they worked it out enough to stay together through this Holocaust of Egypt get themselves through 40 years in the desert without decimating each other, came to the brink of civil war numbers of times, but never completely splintered. And even way down the line in the time of the Mishnah, there are still people from the 10 tribes who have been glommed into Yehuda and Binyamin. Whether it's the people like the Chachamim up in Tiberia, there were people who were up in Tiberia who had always been up in Tiberia. It wasn't like that the people from Yehuda and Binyamin migrated north. It was that the people up there in the Galil and the Golan managed to somehow survive the Assyrian exile, and there were still families that remained, which is, it's just really interesting to see that this internecine warfare didn't decimate us, which is in and of itself amazing. So anyway, so Leah gets the Dudaim, and then, okay, so Rav
Let me
Hirsch,
give you this chair.
all right, so that the video shouldn't be full of squeakies. It's that and the interruptions on the PA, and, part of the video thing. Thank you, Ariel, I appreciate it. Ooh, and it's even a little higher, so I don't feel so short. Okay, so Rav Hirsch is writing in the 19th century, and, you've seen his fair share of drama in Europe. So he says,
Hello, no, you're all so lucky because we have a Geo cook sale today. So come and buy. It'll be delicious.
Geo has a cook sale. Okay, Ayushara Ugam Khan, we see that even here, Asek Ritsimi, a very serious incident. Ach Eif Shar Ha'alot al Da'at, Sheleah, Asher Kol Chayeha Hitrakzu, Hitrakzu b'she'ifa, that's an aspiration, lirchosh et ahavat ba'ala, Leah zo, tomar b'milot koved arosh. How can she, this Leah, who all she really wants is her husband's love, how could she possibly say, seriously, Bilakacht et ishti? Okay? You took my husband. No, you didn't. She knows darn well that Yaakov's loving Rachel has nothing to do with Rachel. How could she blame her for that? Right? Even for that to even come out of her mouth, right? Ve'ata tikri gam et duda'i. Should probably say duda'i, right? Duda'i, and now you're going to take my duda'im. וכאילו חשיבות כלשהי נודעת למספר דודאים, כאילו היה אלה מעלים או מורידים בשעה שהמדובר הוא באהבת הבעל, right? It's like she's thinking, do you think that you can quantify, right? That somehow these flowers quantitatively can control love, and with the flowers there's more love, and without the flowers there's less love, and if I give you 2 flowers out of 5, then you get 2 figs.
Mrs. Saffern, your students is here. Mrs. Saffern, please come up to the Learning Center.
Quantification of, forget the preposterous premise, but the quantification of it is a little ridiculous. V'nir'eh eifo sheha'inyan kula mashkef et yachasea re'ud shehayu shruim bein shtei ha'achayot. But what this is about, this story is to reflect the state of the relationship between the sisters. This isn't about Yaakov so much as it is about Leah and Rachel. That there's this perpetual competition between them. Like while Yaakov is still in the field, right? Ba'od Yaakov basadeh. Yoshevet hanashim b'tzavta. Yoshvot hanashim b'tzavta. They're literally sitting in council. Et ha'aravim hu mivaleh chalifot. Like literally Erevin Leah, Erevin. They're counting. They're watching who does he sleep with, whose tent is he in tonight, whose tent is he not in tonight, like, again, the degree of insecurity, competitiveness, that love-hate relationship that they must have had. It's like, so according to the Hirsch, that's what it's all about, okay? That next one should be Reuven, she'odenu na'ar, he's still a child. Mevi duda'im min hasadeh. Tni li mehem, give me some, mibakeshet Rachel. Ezo drisha marhiva, like what a, like it's arrogant, marhiva is arrogant. Request, Omeret Leah derech halatza, okay? And she says, Vikino tenet la mehaduda'im, what am I gonna give, yeah, right? It's a sarcastic, rhetorical. דבר זה מוכיח מלשון לכן שבדברי רחל אתה אומרת רחל מכיוון alright, sorry, הואלת בטובך, right? לכן היה הוא איתך, גם הלילה, you know. So it's like, according to Rav Hirsch, what's going on here is this is about the sisters. This is about the tit for tat, the tension that was in this household, and what obviously sets the stage for what comes. And even if so then she goes out. Leah literally goes out to when Yaakov comes home, and Batavo Leah likralo, and she says, "You have to come to me tonight because I bought you." Right? Like, yeah, that really, it's like, in a way it turns the whole concept of prostitution on its head, but it's like this concept that, I acquired the rights to you. And then the weirdest thing is, right, so Vayishka b'ma, fine, a deal's a deal. Vayishma Elohim Eleh. Okay. That there's this divine acknowledgement that this is not just pure pettiness. That there is a deep pain here, that there's something profoundly cosmic going on. Because Elohim is Midat Hadin. It's not Vayishma Adonai. He's, and Elohim is either nature, in other words, she deserves it. She literally has earned it in whatever way, she's earned it. Or Vayishma Elohim in the sense of Midat Hadin, he's saying, Leah, right,
Not because of the Judah.
Not just because of the Judah.
She had the baby because it was Midat.
Correct. Right. And here, and this is where the whole theological discussion goes on about, how much is chemistry and how much is divine intervention, but as I said, that's a little bit off the topic. But the text makes really clear here that God has approved this message, and that what she did, as harsh as it sounds, this drive to have more children, or this drive to have Yaakov be with her, love her, whatever it is, was sanctioned by God.
So what is going to go with his actions? Was he overstepping his bounds? Maybe he was part of his plan.
Right. So was he overstepping his bounds? Again, it depends on whether you see him as a kid who's just trying to make mommy happy, which is certainly not overstepping bounds, or whether he is already overstepping his bounds and trying to make up to his mother what his father is not giving, which sadly we know is very common amongst children already of this age. It's that kind of, they're on this cusp of understanding how reproduction works, and yet they're still vulnerable to what's called magical thinking. This, and particularly at this age of 7 or 8, they're certainly old enough to understand how reproduction happens, particularly in this scenario where they're with goats and sheep and cows and they see it. But does he really understand what that love is, what sexual love is, what emotional love is, like, that's a little bit unclear. But no matter what, if he gets that at all, he is, but on the other hand, he just wants his mom to be happy. He wants his mom and dad to be happy, right? It's like the kids that always, doesn't matter how bad it is, the kids want their parents to get back together again.
And they always feel responsible. Maybe if they were better children, it wouldn't have occurred.
Right. And particularly because he's the oldest, right? This fits very well into the psyche of the oldest child. Like, I am responsible, and he's doing this. He's trying to step in to somehow save the day, save the family, and never quite works out the way he wants it to.
All the way through, to
All
the
the way
story of
through.
Yosef.
Right, right. He tries to, and I might get to that. I doubt it, but we might.
But it is
yes,
striking
but it's
what you
true.
just said about Elohim, because last week, when Leah has her first child, it says Vayishma Hashem, that it like the Torah is intentionally changing the
I
language
think
here
so.
from, in the beginning, it feels maybe that Hashem like pitied her
And that's
and her
exactly what
situation.
it says, right?
Yeah, but
That-
now, it's a change.
And I think
That's
also,
very
when it says
striking.
by Reuven, by Yiftach et Rachma, right? He opened her, specifically that Lashon of Rechem and Rachamim. And based on what you just said, you could almost, and again, this is a homiletic and midrashic type of reading, but you could even say that Hashem is trying to get her to feel badly for Rachel. Like, don't just see yourself as the victim here. But at this point, she is the victim, and God is saying, you're right, you're the victim. This is, I'm gonna do a little bit here to intervene. Leah's the victim. Leah's the victim. And so Leah gives birth, fifth son, Vatomer Leah, Natan Elokim schari ake natati shivchati leishi, vatikra shmo Yisachar. Right? Oh, we had skipped, I just realized we skipped the part where Leah gave Zilpah to Yaakov and had Gad and Asher. Right. So what's interesting is that in her mind, she's getting, even though she said, I bought you, what she's getting rewarded for is giving her shifra to her husband, which she didn't have to do. She had 4 children already, right? She didn't have to throw that into the mix, but in order to have more children with Yaakov, she did. What the Rashbam says here, I think I wrote it down, but I'm not sure. Barbanel, Hirsch, Stizad, Malbim. No, I forgot. I apologize.
It just seems so odd that she could own those children.
That she could.
She could own the children of the village.
Well, that was the rule.
I know, it's just like in our westernized society.
Well, if you think of it kind of like as a foster child,
With the mother living in the same.
with the mother theoretically living in the same place, right? That this foster mother has the assumptions, has the financial means.
There is Mishmar tonight. There is Mishmar tonight with Rav Feldman. He is discussing practical questions on Lashon Hara. What can you say? What can you not say? Tonight there will be pizza dinner. Dinner at 5:15. Share from 5:30 to 6:15. Mishmar tonight.
So,
I don't want to digress.
no, it's okay, because I mean, this becomes very important when we get to Yosef, this division between the children of the Pelagshim and the children of the quote-unquote full wives. The assumption was that if you became, first of all, if you ended up as a shivcha, it meant that you were somehow conquered, right? You were either conquered or you were sold because your family was so conquered. Either way, being a shivcha was probably better off than being dead or prostituted. And particularly if you live in a house like Laban's, where he doesn't seem particularly ethical, there doesn't seem to be an indication that he's cruel.
But we also learned with Abraham that Sarah was a shifra, but she was a princess.
She was a
So
princess,
did
but
people want their daughters to even in any capacity be with the Avot.
Yes,
And
that's
they
what,
could have had a royal or high birth,
Right.
but just to be in that
and
home.
we see that
Like
with
in-
Paro, and we see that according to the Midrash, Ruth and Orpah were also princesses. So the Midrash there says it's better to be even a shifcha in the house of Abraham, or it's better to be a poor woman in the house of Ruth than a princess in the palace. Okay. Now, it also is possible that Paro was doing this to cover his own tushy, right? In other words, that Abraham had come with the whole incident of Sarah's my sister, then there's, clearly it becomes very evident that Abraham has some kind of massive divine protection, right? That something happens in the house of Paro, and he realizes, and he doesn't take revenge on Abraham, he doesn't kill him, he just, hi, why did you not tell me? And then Abraham insults him and says, because I knew you guys were morally depraved, and Paro is like, okay, would you please leave, and here's money to do so. That's a kind of a weird story. So I would say on the most shot level, what Paro is doing is saying, I am going to make an alliance with this clearly divinely protected, very powerful in the eyes of the gods man. And I'm going to marry my daughter, or give my daughter into his possession, so that I will appease him and appease my gods, and everybody will be happy. That kind of sounds like a very ancient or even medieval way.
They did, they used their daughters for marriage.
Exactly.
Gain.
Right. So, the Midrash is very nice in the sense that he recognized that there was something different about Abraham. I would like to accept it on its face. It certainly makes us look good. I don't know if that was necessarily the original motivation. So, but I think here, there's something about these families that even Lavan, who is somewhat of a weasel, he's not cruel. He's really not cruel. It seems on the face of things that he loves he cares about, at least, his daughters. It certainly seems that he, if he didn't care about Leah, he wouldn't have married her off like that in some way, shape, or form.
Well, you'd be stuck with her.
Or he'd be stuck with her. But I'm sure he could have, I think we talked about this last week, like why didn't he notify Abraham and say, hi, or Yitzchak, right? I have this daughter, you have this son. He certainly seemed to know about the lineage and Eliezer and all that kind of stuff, right? Because he had grown up with them. It doesn't, if he had really wanted to unload Leah, he could have, particularly once Yaakov comes and tells him the whole story. So then he knows that Esav is still alive. He, in theory, could have made contact with Yitzchak and said, hi, you have an older son, I have an older daughter, let's get this deal done.
Well, he knows it, so, growing up in the house of Abraham, he preferred that both girls marry into the house of
Right,
Abraham.
right.
So he's really doing his service.
Right. So, it seems, and then, he runs after them, and, after this, when they literally sneak out in the middle of the night, 6 years later, Lavan's words to Yaakov, like, why did you do this? Why did you take my children away from me without my having a chance to say goodbye? It's very easy to read that as crocodile tears, right? Because we're so stuck with this image of Lavan as a weasel. But you can be a business weasel. I think of, The Godfather, whatever The Sopranos. You can be a mafia don and still really, really, really love your family. There's a piece of me that thinks that Lavan really did love his children and didn't want them to leave, and he was just this classic possessive patriarch who was doing whatever he could to get his little girls to stay by his side, and then when his son-in-law slipped away in the middle of the night, he was a little upset. Just a little. Real trauma. Real trauma. you know, one of the things that I try very hard to do with my students, and certainly with adults, is to separate between drash and pshat, and at least question our long-held assumptions about these people, because our assumptions are so informed by midrash. And it's not to say that the midrash is wrong, but midrash is Parshanut. That's what it's explanation, and if you're doing it, there's not a unified field theory about what these people were like, and there's definitely an agenda going on to some degree. So we kind of always have to keep that in mind. Now, again, not that Lovin wasn't a weasel, but I don't know if he was.
He was still their father.
He was still their father, right? I really don't think he was an evil man. I think he was immoral, and that's what I think it's very clear that the Midrash is trying to say. Immoral and evil really are the same. You can't be immoral in our society, because then you are viewed as evil. Okay, so then Leah gets pregnant again. Oh, I'm sorry. So the Rashbam, before we go on, says that the reason that the name Yisachar, which is really Yisachar, has two sins is because there are two rewards. Reward number one is for, I bought you, I earned you, and number two is I gave you Zilpah. Because otherwise there shouldn't be a second sin in here. So then she gets pregnant again, and to me this is the best evidence that these Dudaim were in fact somehow fertility drugs, because speaking as somebody who was an infertility patient for many, many years, the nature of infertility medicine is that it often stays in your reproductive system for at least a year. Now, I didn't have such luck, but after my daughter was born and I went to the gynecologist, and no, it wasn't my daughter, it was my son. He had just moved here, it was Ruben. And the gynecologist said to me, so what form of birth control are you on now? And I looked at her and I said, have you looked at my medical records? Do I seem like I need birth control? And she said, well, the woman that I just saw before you was also an infertility patient, had a singleton, and 11 months later had triplets.
Oh.
And I've heard of this more than once. I know of at least 3 cases like this, and yeah, they have found that this stuff stays in your system. So either that or, whatever it is, once it kicks the hormones back into gear or into gear in the first place, then sometimes those hormones stay on autopilot for a little while. As I said, I didn't have such a, but anyway. So she gets pregnant again, and then she says, Zavadni Elohim, which, by the way, this word Zeved is one of my favorite words, Hapax legomena, which means it is only found once. Yeah, it's a Mizef word.
Say that again?
Hapax, Hapax, legomena, Logomona. Hapax is happening, logo is word, mono is one.
Okay. That's a good.
It's an extra credit question for my students. And Ms. F did not make it up because I have seen it in some scholarly articles. So Zabadni Elohim Oti Zeved Tov. He somethinged me something good. It always makes me think of Julie Andrews' song, I Must Have Done Something Good. Right? Hapa'am. And Hapa'am Yizbeleni Ishi. And a Zavul is a home. So now my husband will actually live with me. Now that we know this whole backstory, this name starts making a lot more sense. Right? He hasn't been living with me. He left because I stopped giving him children. So now I have 6 children. Now he's really going to, realize that I am worth staying with, and he's going to stay with me. Alas, doesn't happen. He yaladati lo shishaba. Batikrashmo Zvulun. Then she has a daughter, and her name is Dina. So has another child, right? So something's going right. Yaakov does stay with her, at least for a little bit. Vayiskor Elohim, and again the use of that word as opposed to Hashem, et Rachel. Vayishma Eleha, so she's still davening. I'm sorry, Vayishma Eleha Elohim, Vayiftach et Rachma. And he opened her womb. Parallel language to Leah, except again with the Elohim, that there's clearly a decision on high that's made. Now it is time for Rachel to have a child. The hows and the whys are not really revealed even in the Midrash.
So it could be the due time.
Right, if she kept some. Right. But Tahar, I'm sorry, yeah, if she kept, you're right, because she bought them. So it could be that these Judaim kind of push it over the edge. So she gets pregnant and she has a child. But Tomer Yosef Elohim, Asaf Elohim et Cherpati, God has gathered in my shame. Vatikra Shmo Yosef, and she calls him Yosef. Vayomer Yosef Hashem li ben Achel. So there's big debate here about what Yosef's name means, because if you read it on its surface, if it goes from the word Asaf, Asafli, then his name should have been Asaf, not Yosef. Yosef seems to be a tefillah, right? Hashem should give me another child, which sounds rather rude.
But for her desperation,
But
she
her
couldn't
right.
even name him Asaf.
Correct.
Like, I'm now okay because I have a child. She
Exactly.
Because she really needed more.
More. So one of the Mefarshim, wait, I'm going to find him. One of the Mefarshim actually reads it differently. I just want to find which one it is. This is the third one, right? So, Pshat, yes, this is her desperation. Pshat, this is her tefillah. According to the Rashbam, Yosef is actually is a smush of Asaf and Yosef. You take the two and put them together. But I think is it the Malbim? Nope, it's not the Malbim. Where is it? No, because he's the one, right, Shtei Amirot, it's two Amirot, Radak, I just didn't underline it, I apologize. Right under the Rashbam on this page, Radak, right, Ben Acher, Lifachot Yihieli Ben Acher, at least there should be another child, Imlo Yihieli Ben, Imlo, Yeli Ben Yoter, right? Then this is not the one that I'm thinking of. One of the Mefarshim, and it's because that's the same thing, one of the Mefarshim says that what she's actually saying is, I have now had another child, meaning in addition to done enough time.
Maybe it's the Rashbam Chavdal.
Shmo Yosef, Sha'amra Asaf Elohim Cherpati, and came to no Asaf. Yud, why? Al Shem should Nitpalala, should Nitpalala Yosef. No, that's a Tefillah Ben Yoter, Hare Im Ze, right, no, the Rashbam also says it's a Tefillah. I must not have.
So last time we say בעינייך כי תוסיף תחבולות טבעיות וסגולות לקחת גם את דודאי בני ומן היסור לבך
That's Rashi, right, what you're reading?
Malbim.
Malbim.
Last line the Malbim שהתפלל אליי לא להבטיח אל בניינים טבעיים. No, it's not illegal.
No, because I think that's,
It's not. I just saw the word Yosef.
okay, I promise you I saw it, I
I'm
just
sure
don't
you
remember
did.
where. That one of the Mefarshim says, and then you said Malbim's like, oh wait, maybe it is a more modern one.
Yeah, but the Rashbam says, B'chaf Daled, Vatikra Shmo Yosef,
Right.
Hashamra Asaf Elokim et Cherpati.
Right, that's what I'm saying, the
Im Kein Tikrehu
Asaf,
Asaf,
right,
Yud Shel Yosef Lama, Al Shem Shenitpalala Yosef.
right. But again, it seems like she's davening for another one.
Right.
So one of the Mefarshim who, one of the Mefarshim, one of the more, and it might have been Malbim, and I just might not have copied and pasted, said that she's making a statement, not that he should, but that he has. In other words, above and beyond Dan and Naphtali, which are legally my children, Hashem, not that he should give me another, but he has given me another. Which to me makes a lot more sense in that both elements of, that says that he has gathered in my shame, he has given me another child, open parentheses, a child of my own body, close parentheses, and therefore I'm going to call that child on the mercy of God, so to speak, that I now have another child in addition to Dan and Naphtali, who are my legal children, if that makes sense. And again, it's like just a very different take than what we're used to seeing with, Rashi, she had a nevuah, that she's going to have another one, or Rashbam, she's davening, or Radak, also that she's, at least let me have one more child, if I'm not going to have 5 more children like my sister has, whatever. But I think Ariel is right that we also see her tremendous desperation. So then we fast forward, there's a while that passes, there's actually at least 6 years that pass between Yosef and Binyamin, if not more. We're not sure how far into the story this is this the first 7 years, is this the second 7 years, but we know that intervening is the story with the last 6 years, and the sheep, and the spotted, and the speckled, and the brown, and the white, and the chemistry, and selective reproduction, and genetic mutations, and apparently there are some incredibly cool articles about how Yaakov did that. It was not black magic. And we get to the Reuben and Shimon and Dinah and Reuben and Shimon and Levi and Dinah and Reuben in the bed, and then at the very end of Lamed Hey, she's pregnant, they're on their way back to Canaan, and she gives birth. So in Pasuk Yud Zayin Yud Chet in Parak Lamed Hey, so chapter 35, verses 17 and 18. Right? So she goes into labor, and she's having trouble with her birth, and the Mialedet says to her, don't be afraid, because this too is a boy. Which, not, either at that point he's out or he's breech, unclear. One of the two. It probably that he was breech.
How does that show that it's breech?
Because his feet are coming out.
That's what's,
Oh, the feet.
That's what's out first.
instead of the
Well, how do you
head.
know that?
Well, she says, don't be
She sees that
afraid.
it's
She
a boy.
sees that it's a boy. So
She can see
either the child is out and she's just, Rachel is so exhausted. And there's actually one of the Mefarshim says that in each one of the children was a twin, but in this case it was a triplet. And that's why she died, was that there were 3 babies instead of the usual 2.
And were the other 2 females? Because when they
Seems so.
it sees that the
Yeah.
Shvatim, each one had a
Twin sister, right. But I think it's just easier to say that she had trouble giving birth.
Yeah.
Many, many women died in childbirth, and Rachel is one of them. So as she is dying, right, she knows
Well,
she is going to
especially a
die.
breech then much more.
Right. So she sees that she's dying, and she calls him Bain Oni, and his father calls him Binyamin. Right? And the question then becomes, what does the name Ben Oni mean? And there's a debate amongst the Mefarshim, because the word on, Aleph Vav Nun, can mean strength, like Reuven Bechoriata Reshit Oni, the beginning of my strength, or on could mean Tsar. And if you look in the Mefarshim, they argue what Binyamin's name means. Does it mean from is it son of my sorrow, or is it son of my Rashi, right? So Ben Oni Ben Sa'ari, and then he calls him Binyamin which means son of the south, because he's the only child that was born in Eretz Yisrael. And then the Malbim, she says that Vatikra Shmo ben Oni Rotzel Lomar ben Kochi, the son of my strength, like that I still have the strength to push him out, or that I have strength, right? Shekochi natan li ki, that I still have the strength right before I die to give him a name. Either way, this poor child now grows up with the specter of, I killed my mother. At least Yaakov changes his name to Binyamin, so like there's
So
no,
that's the thing that bothers me. When the mother gives the name, it's supposed to be with Ruach HaKodesh.
Right.
And here she was the closest you are at the moments before death. And the father comes along and says, no Ben-Oni, Ben-Yamin.
right,
But
but
it certainly is clear that Yaakov thought she meant
I don't think they were
son
on the
of my
same page.
pain.
Right.
think
I don't
there
know
was
if
And
it-
he didn't want that
schism
name.
there.
right.
He loved Binyamin
Of
so
course,
much,
But the
so.
fact that the mother gives the name and then dies, you go and change the name?
So this
That
is the big
seems to be
debate. This is a discussion, I had
tough
this
for
with my
me to-
students.
I think it's a mercy that he
Right.
did that.
Yeah.
And this is always the debate amongst my students also. Is it a
Yeah.
mercy or is it a chutzpah? And especially if Ben-Oni could mean son of my strength. But I just have to think that Yaakov either
But maybe they
Yaakov-
wouldn't think that because she
exactly.
died, so they would give it that name.
son of my sorrow, that he wanted to remove all ambivalence, or that was the only way he could cope with her death, was to, even for himself, change the ambivalence of the meaning. Like, I don't want, it's like the word sanction, it means both to approve of and to ban. And so it's like Yaakov saying, I don't want any question around this child's name, I don't want anybody saying this child was not meant to be, Rachel is being punished by God, but it's troubling. It's troubling.
Euthanized it, what's the word? It made it pretty, he prettied it up.
He euphemized it.
Euphemized it.
Euphemized it.
Euthanized.
So now we have the full complement of 12 merry men. I think we're gonna stop here. I think we need to stop. What we're gonna do next week, because it is the last week, we are going to hopefully get Yosef, Yosef the brat, Yosef sold, the brothers redeem themselves, Yosef redeemed, all in 1 hour. I'm not sure that we're gonna get there, but, I do wanna,
Is there any way we could have an extra class?
that's not up.
Sorry to be chutzpah there.
Right, no, thank you, I appreciate the question. That's not a question that I can answer. I think that somehow that you have to ask Pam in scheduling. I know that Mrs. Kahan is due to start after Pesach, so I certainly
It's
don't.
not really time.
Right, I don't know that there's time. Pam mentioned that maybe she could record me giving a shiur, and then people could listen. As I said, I'm gonna try and get through as much as I can next week, and we'll leave more for next year. Next year, Mir Tzashem, next year, yes, okay.
Thank you.
We had another
Thank you.
question.